Hi everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to CML's webinar today on Strategic Energy Master Planning. We're thrilled to have you with us today, and those of you that are elected officials who have registered will receive 1 University training credit. Today's presentation, the actual PDF, is available on our website under cml.org under training materials. We are also recording it, and it'll be posted to our website later today or first thing in the morning. So if you want to share this with someone or watch it again, if you missed something that's presented, that will be available to you. If you're not familiar with the webinar format, you should see a control panel to the top right of the screen. You have an orange arrow to the left of the panel, which will minimize the entire box. All participants will be muted for the webinar, but we certainly encourage you to ask questions by typing them into the question box on the control panel. You can enter questions in any time, but we will answer the questions at the end of the presentation. So our presenters today are Ashley Brasovan, Business Development for McKinstry, and Philip Saig, who's the Director of Technical Services for McKinstry, and Tom Harrod, who's Climate and GHG Program Administrator for the City and County of Denver. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley. Again, thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lisa. So I think today we really wanted to start with the current trends and challenges within cities across the U.S., but also focusing a little bit on Colorado and kind of how that ties into energy and sustainability within local government. So I think some things we've seen in local government within Colorado is, everyone's moving to Colorado. It's a prime state to live in, so residents are really looking for improved livability within these cities. So the walkability, bikeability of cities, vibrant downtown corridors, city amenities, parks and facilities, and residents are really wanting a lot more of this without increased taxes. That's the big thing. And then resiliency, I think, is the latest local buzzword across the U.S. I just found out that the city of Atlanta actually changed their Office of Sustainability's name to the Office of Resiliency, which kind of shows you how much that really how much they tie together. And then I think another thing is attainment of sustainability goals, which Tom will talk a little bit more about, and how the city of Denver is addressing some of that. And then I think one of the other big hot topics within local government today is economic development and public focus on quality of life. There's obviously more challenges in local government, but I think these are some of the hot topics currently within local government in Colorado. And so how are we addressing these challenges, and how does this tie into the city's triple bottom line? I think the city of Denver really has used energy and sustainability to address a lot of these challenges. And I think several studies have really shown that energy efficiency is a core resilience strategy within a lot of local governments, because it strengthens the energy systems and the communities they serve, providing more reliable and affordable energy sources for the entire community. I think energy efficiency really helps reduce the community's vulnerability to a variety of hazards. I think a lot of cities and just organizations in general really focus on the triple bottom line, so looking at what resonates to different stakeholders or different residents. So energy efficiency and sustainable operations do matter. They address the economic prosperity of a city, so they help to lower utility bills within city-owned facilities and across. That trickles into a lot of the other residential and commercial facilities. It really helps emphasize sustainability goals. So looking at the environmental health aspect, energy efficiency really helps reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve water and energy efficiency within facilities. And then it also really looks at the social equity part of the triple bottom line. It improves the community facilities and amenities that we talked about on the last slide, and then it really improves the building's comfort and controllability too. So how does government see this within all of the different organizations? So when asked, there's a study that asked, what does sustainability how important is that to you? And government as a whole said 74% said sustainable operations and capital improvement planning and looking at energy efficiency within that was important to them. And I think a lot of the 90%, so manufacturing, commercial real estate, those are the big energy users, but I think this still really is important at the local and state level. I think another thing is what drives investment in energy efficiency. So why do local governments invest in energy efficiency? So anywhere from 60 to 115 billion is spent on energy improvements every year within the US. And so the biggest driver for this is policy. So the city of Denver in 2013 established their sustainability office, and under Executive Order 123, they did that and looked at, really looking at making an emphasis on sustainability. I think another big one is building codes and appliance standards. So Energy Star rates appliances. A lot of people only accept Energy Star appliances within their buildings. And I think Denver's also implemented the 2015 IECC building code, which has really promoted and driven energy efficiency within commercial and residential facilities. And then just looking at certifications too. I mean, people want to get B certified. They want to be their Energy Star score. I know Denver started benchmarking a lot of their facilities, so that's really driving companies and facilities getting an Energy Star score and having that initial benchmark to improve on. And then we also have the Colorado Energy Office here in Colorado, which really promotes performance contracting, and they have a lot of free third-party services available to local governments that emphasize energy efficiency and help drive that within the state. So the American Council for an Energy Efficiency Economy ranked Colorado 14th, but Denver was ranked 9th in the nation in May of 2017. So this is actually a really cool site. Local governments, or you can go on and to ACEE's website and input all of your city's data and see kind of where your city would fall on this spectrum. But they typically rank the top 50 or 51 cities across the US. So Denver was tied for number 9 with San Francisco this year, I believe, and I think Boston's number 1. But I think this just shows how Colorado, the state as a whole, is a leader, but also Denver is really a leader within local government across the U.S. and they're in promoting energy efficiency. And so this really ranks, the focus areas for this are really looking at state and local policy, implementing outreach and training, compliance. So I think I'm going to hand it over to Tom to talk a little bit more about why Denver is number 9 and what the strategy is for energy efficiency in the city.
Great. Thanks, Ashley. Denver wasn't always in the top 10. I think we started out in the top 20 in that ranking, but that was really something that drove us to look at how we operate as both a city and what we do in the community. But we've been tracking resource consumption metrics since 1990. We have a fairly long history going back to some of our green fleet programs and other programs really looking at conservation of resources. But in 2005, we really started focusing on carbon intensity of that resource consumption. We developed greenhouse gas inventory for the city and the community of Denver. And in doing that, we realized that government operations really only represent a small percentage of the community-wide resource consumption. And a lot of times folks will, or you might hear the metric that cities as a whole only represent about 3% of the land mass, but are accountable for 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. And so cities really are where it's at, but when you dive down even deeper into government operations, we realize that our own operations are a relatively small part. So within Denver, our government operations, our fleet, our government fleet uses about 1.1% of community-wide transportation fuel, about 5.6% of the electricity, and that includes streetlights. That is a really it's quite a large consumption of electricity in most cities. 2.4% of natural gas is attributed to the local government, and 2.4% of carbon emissions. So really, when we look at how to make Denver as a whole sustainable or resilient, we realize that we not only have to lead by example, so taking care of our own shop, but also to set community goals to drive strategies, programs, and policies that help our community as a whole become more sustainable. As Ashley mentioned, the Office of Sustainability has set out 2020 sustainability goals. We have government operation goals, which really, again, look at our own shop and our operations and how we operate as a city. So it covers everything from air quality to climate to water quality and quantity to our workforce. But even more importantly, it also established community goals. And so when you look at all these goals collectively, the 12 goals that are in front of you, energy really is a key goal. The types of energy influence our air quality and climate goals. So whether our energy is coming from renewable sources or non-renewable resources. All the related emissions from our electricity generation that Denver as a community consumes contributes to air quality and our climate goals. But also, I think you could make the argument that every other goal on here has some energy component to it. You can even, you could say that health could be increased if more people walked or biked to work or to school. In terms of the workforce, living in a transit desert, if there's more transit options, it also decreases the amount of energy consumed in the transportation sector. So I think we really realized as these goals were being laid out that energy really is a key component. Most of these other topic areas were covered in existing city plans, so whether it was a solid waste master plan, a transit plan, a lot of these goals had something that they could tie to and really lean on. Energy didn't have anything. There wasn't really a comprehensive energy plan for the city. So in 2014, the Office of Sustainability asked our department, the Department of Environmental Health, as the coordinating agency, to develop an actionable plan to meet those 2020 community goals. We knew that even within the last few years, things have been changing so rapidly. And so the plan had to be robust but flexible, but we also needed some level of independence. This really needed to come from an outside party telling us, the city, what we needed to do to meet that 2020 goal. We needed projections for energy consumption, so an understanding of what our past history was and what our future energy needs will be, doing a gap analysis of looking at the business as usual and where we need to be, and then analyze those potential strategies as well. But beyond that, it wasn't just enough to have strategies. We needed other components to it, like the impact of it, the feasibility. Was it a proven strategy? Was it an innovative strategy? What is a rough estimate of the cost? But we also needed it to be transparent as well, so that we could manipulate some of the assumptions in there based on new knowledge that might come forth as we move forward. And so Philip's going to talk a little bit more about some of the detailed work that they did, but I wanted to point out a few key things of the energy plan itself. It really relied on energy benchmarking and transparency. I think when we first sat down and talked, I think the first thing we heard was, it's the old adage, you can't manage what you don't measure, and that's certainly true of energy. For most of the communities out there who get energy consumption metrics from their utility, you're probably getting two sets of data. It's the total number of buildings in your city and the total consumption. And so it's really hard to develop any type of program or policy with just 2 points of data. But more importantly, it would also deliver that data and transparency to the market if we had benchmarking. So that would be an example of this is when a building looks at their energy consumption, puts it into the portfolio manager program from EPA. They get a score, and then that score is available to the broader market for broader decision making. It was a proven strategy in other cities. I don't recall the number of cities. I think it's getting close to now 20 major cities within the U.S. It's very popular worldwide, but it does lead to better city programs and policies because you have better data. And then building on that, there was a strategy to develop a performance track for underperforming buildings. So when buildings get that information back and they see that they're not as energy efficient as some of the other buildings in Denver, they can take action. They can do a number of things to actually improve the efficiency of their building, whether it's a small retrofit that has a quick return on investment, or a commissioning or audit study as well. Those are all things that were identified to help buildings improve that score. That strategy, it was the top and really the top strategy in our energy plan that McKinstry delivered to us. We went forward with that relatively quickly. In December of 2016, as a result of a lengthy and robust stakeholder process, we identified an ordinance that we could put forward. And that ordinance passed in December of 2016. Buildings are now currently collecting energy data. They're inputting it into Portfolio Manager, and I think our first set of data should be available later this summer. So we're really pretty pleased with how that ordinance and that process came out of the energy plan. Some of the other strategies that we've really moved on, I think, quickly, the energy code, as was mentioned, we've updated it to the 2015. But not only that, but I think we've identified how we can continue to update that code on a regular basis. We're reviewing residential strategies aimed at energy efficiency at the time of sale, but also increasing access to renewables. So not only are we looking at making homes more efficient, but in looking at the energy that's powering those homes becoming cleaner as well. The last two pieces, we are utilizing the tool that McKinstry developed for us to demonstrate distributed renewables and their impact on our energy and climate goals. So as I mentioned before, and as Philip will detail, the tool really was flexible, and it allows us to toggle some of the assumptions of renewables to set different goals for renewables. And then lastly, this plan really has just served as a backdrop for a lot of our community goals, like our 80% greenhouse gas reduction and 100% renewable goal that the mayor announced a few weeks ago. So this plan continues to give us dividends. We can use, as I mentioned, we want it to be flexible and used long term. It's been able to do that for us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Philip, who will take you through a little more detailed examination of the tool.
Great, thanks, Tom. Yeah, so my name is Philip Saig with McKinstry, and got a few more slides we want to go through around the strategic energy plan, and then I'm going to transfer over out of the PowerPoint that you're looking at and actually give you a live look into the dynamic tool that we built alongside Tom and his team at Denver Environmental Health. So, when Tom first kind of came to us, see if I move that to the next slide, toggle down here. How you guys been advancing these? There we go. We really set the goal that Tom kind of stated out of their energy goal as part of their greater community goals was really all about, hey, here's where we're at today in our benchmark year, and here's where we want to be in 2020, and how do we get there? And as we mulled this over and kind of thought, what's the best route to go, or what's really needed to achieve this, we thought first what we need to do is a gap analysis. We really need to understand, where we're at today with our energy consumption across the entire city and county of Denver. What are the top recommendations that we can make, strategic recommendations such as the benchmarking ordinance that Tom detailed out? And then what do we do with this information once we put it into a report? And I think this, and that really drove us to build this dynamic energy model of the city. I think our original conversations were really about, hey, can we come up with a plan and a list of recommendations moving forward? And as we kind of mulled it over, we all sort of agreed, we don't think we can predict the future, and we think things are going to change, and we're going to make recommendations, some of which are going to be implemented, some of which are going to change. Data is going to change. Year-over-year consumptions are going to change. And we felt like maybe as soon as we got this plan finally published and completed, it was going to be obsolete. And so we thought, well, alongside these recommendations, let's also create a way to track progress against those recommendations and make decisions in real time. And that's what kind of drove us to additionally build this dynamic model. So kind of starting out with the gap analysis and the goals, first is the goal, just to detail it out around energy, was hold total energy consumed in Denver for buildings, mobility, and industrial processes below the total consumed in 2012, while cutting fossil fuel consumption by 50% from 2012 levels. So this 2012 year was really serving as the baseline benchmark that we're going to measure ourselves against when we get to 2020. And why the goal is detailed out the way it is, it's really holding energy consumed really speaks to energy efficiency. It really drives us to come up with strategies around what are we doing with the energy we're already using? What waste is in the system currently? And then the second half of this goal that talks about cutting fossil fuel consumption, that really starts to get to, well, now we got to use some energy, of course, and how are we going to get that energy? And that kind of makes us think about renewable energy. And, can it be solar? Can it be wind that's producing the energy that we are using? So this is a great way that Denver has articulated the goal to drive strategies around both cutting out the waste and producing renewables, and not sort of fuel switching or mortgaging one for the other, so to speak. What we're looking at here in terms of a chart is this baseline kind of idea. What you've got here along the vertical axis is MMBTUs, are basically our normalized total consumption in British thermal units, or just BTUs of energy. And then, of course, time along the horizontal axis. And what we see, we've got our benchmark year 2012, and then we've got our baseline fossil fuel consumption there in green. And then we've got a business as usual case. And so really what that business as usual case is detailing in the orange line is, hey, if we weren't to implement any of these strategies that we're recommending and we're just to kind of continue on our way, we actually saw a pretty flat progression going forward out to 2020 for business as usual, which speaks to, we can see it kind of bump up in 2013 and 14 and then kind of drop back down. And that has a lot to do with all policies that are already in place that Denver has, utility programs that are already in place, certain legislation that's already in place, which I had to take all that into account to try to forecast out maybe a linear progression of what a business as usual case is. And then, of course, in the sort of maroon line, you've got the fossil fuel plan forecast, or when we implement all the strategies that we're talking about the plan, do those strategies add up to get us to our goal there in the light blue line, our target fossil fuel consumption goal by the year 2020. So really to keep building strategies until we get to that goal. So that's sort of what that forecast chart is looking at. And then on the right, you've got sort of more of a graphic or this infographic that really speaks to the interoperability of energy and how it touches the other climate goals that Denver has identified. So Ashley talked a little bit about trends out there in municipalities and cities and counties across the country. Resiliency, sustainability, I mean, these things are tried and true here in Colorado, of course, in Denver, and I'm sure the governments that you all are working on the webinar. What we sort of did is said, well, of all the goals out there, where do we see sort of a direct impact of energy in these goals? Because, of course, energy is pervasive. Of course, the climate goal that Denver has to reduce CO2 emissions below 1990 levels is, of course, related to energy consumption. The water quantity goal, the workforce goal, housing, density, land use, mobility, these are, gasoline use and diesel use. These are all very relevant goals that tie into the energy. So we sort of had to identify, hey, where are the overlaps here and how do these goals work together when it comes to energy? And so that kind of fleshed itself out in the report in terms of complementing strategies and relevant strategies to other impacts on other goals that the city had. And so that's kind of our starting point. I hope I articulated what the goal is, what the forecast can look like, and then how does energy relate to these other goals. Thinking about that and thinking about the gap analysis, what we're looking at here is the existing state of the city and county of Denver when it comes to energy. In the 2012 benchmark year through the 2015 was basically when we pulled this together, so a year and a half ago, thereabouts. And what we're looking at in 2012, we've got fossil fuel consumption. And we felt it was useful to articulate stationary fossil fuel versus mobile fossil fuel. And that's sort of a funny term. We don't hear that a lot, stationary. What the heck is stationary fossil fuel? And really what we were referring to is mostly buildings, but there's street lights, for example, there's pickup stations, there's communication nodes, there's a lot of things that use energy that aren't your typical brick and mortar building. So we wanted to articulate what is the electricity, natural gas, chilled water, steam, the sort of energy fuels and uses in stationary energy versus what's mobile. So that's basically our gasoline and our diesel. And depending upon, not for Denver here, but the other one would be jet fuel if you have an airport. We didn't really look at jet fuel in this study actually, but that would be another mobile fossil fuel you'd want to look at. So really, 65% is stationary and 35% is the mobile consumption. And then we wanted to break that up by fuel type specifically. And we've got our main fuels there, which are gasoline, diesel, electricity, and natural gas. I'm not sure why the legend kind of cut that off, but the 38.89% is referring to natural gas. And then, of course, at the bottom, consumption by sector. And this is really important when we get into the strategies, because we really want to know, hey, what fuel is being used and where is it being used, because our strategies for residential are going to differ from our strategies that we'd engage with commercial building owners. A high-rise in downtown Denver has very different strategies that affect it than, say, your home. And, of course, strategies around transportation and gasoline and diesel usage are different as well. Strategies around, car sharing and carpooling and using electric vehicles to reduce gasoline usage are different strategies than we might think about when we think about diesel usage, primarily in our freight or large trucking industries that are passing through and around Denver. So articulating those out helped us go, really, hey, where can we actually save energy out there? Where are the big ticket items? Where are we using this stuff to begin with? And you'd be surprised at how difficult it is to even come up with what these seem like very simple charts. We've got to really cross-reference information from the local utility here. Of course, Xcel Energy is the utility. We've got to cross-reference this with the assessor's database, how many square feet of what type of building stock is across the Denver landscape. We also need to look at, for gasoline and diesel, what cars and trucks are passing through Denver and how frequently and where are they buying that fuel, and what kind of box do we want to draw around the city and county to really count what we can have an effect on when it comes to this type of mobile fuel usage. So we have to make some strategic decisions about that, and then we also have to do some pretty good math to come up with our baselines for these numbers. So this gap analysis is really key in informing what the heck can we do to affect change. Sort of moving along, this brings us to our top strategies that we recommended for Denver to use. And one of the key things that we thought about here, we actually had a very long list of strategies to begin with. Our appendix to our report, I think, might have 50 different strategies in it. And, this is being done in the 2015, 2016 timeframe, which only leaves 3 years of really runtime for Denver to get these things figured out, budgeted for, implemented, and start seeing savings from in a very short amount of time. So we really very quickly realized is we can't recommend 50 strategies to these guys and think that they have a prayer in trying to get all those things done. So we really had to cull them down and go, what are our top and best, highest use of our resources? And we really came up with the list you're seeing in front of you now. So we don't have time today to really unpack every single one of these strategies as we did in the report. But I will say, Tom, I'll highlight some and give a little bit of an overview of maybe each one here. Mandatory utility benchmarking and disclosure. Tom articulated this one already, but that was foundational. I think our teams, we had some team members comment originally, how the heck am I supposed to come up with strategies if I don't even know what's going on? And how are people supposed to manage their energy if they don't even know how they're ranking or how much energy they're using? So this idea that an ordinance needed to be put forth to benchmark facilities was foundational and producing some really good and proven savings. You can kind of see the strategies there. We sort of give a impact, high or medium impact. Not all our low impact strategies obviously fell off the list. And then we wanted to communicate to Denver, hey, are these proven strategies? And what proven meant to us was this strategy has been done somewhere else of a similar scale and setting successfully, and there are ways in which we can do this. There are mechanisms that exist to do this strategy. So, you can see most of them are proven strategies. Looks like about 3 that came out of our report we deemed innovative, or maybe we couldn't find good examples in, say, Atlanta for Ashley's example, or, Las Vegas or Chicago or New York or similar cities to Denver that have done a similar thing. So we've got the benchmarking. We've got existing building commissioning, so going in and really tuning up existing building systems was very highly recommended strategy. and a performance pathway for those that know they could achieve good savings there. Lawrence Berkeley Labs research shows this at about a 16% energy savings from a retrocommissioning implementation project, so pretty good on that one. Temperature setbacks is a really innovative strategy we came out with. It's been done in California a few different times, and they had a state program in California for temperature setbacks, but it's really around web-enabled thermostats across residential properties where there's a automatically senses occupancy in the room or in the home, and when there is no occupancy or when there's vacancy in that area, a setback gets put in place. So if you keep your thermostat at home at 72 degrees, and it's summertime, and it's 90 degrees outside, you're obviously using energy to air condition your space. You leave the home, there's a web-enabled setback that automatically sets back that space temperature now to maybe, say, 76 degrees or 77 degrees, so that we're not using as much energy to cool and keep comfortable a space nobody is in. Pretty straightforward logic, I would say, but we haven't seen that really roll out at scale outside of California. Adoption of the International Energy Conservation Code, or IECC 2015. Denver did, in fact, adopt that, and that's in place now. And what's an interesting thing about that recommendation is it actually it helps us with, of course, reducing energy consumption, but it sort of stops the boat from leaking more than takes energy or water out of the boat. So what I mean by that is, code really comes into play mostly when we're building new things. So there's a blank lot in the city, no energy is being used, it's grass, right, or dirt parking lot or something. We're going to build a new building. Now we're going to actually add more energy consumption. So we're going to go the opposite direction of the goal when we build this new building. But if we build it to a new standard, IECC 2015 versus what Denver had in place before, which was the 2009 code, ASHRAE says there's about a 31% energy savings associated from that code jump. So now you're building a 31% more energy efficient building on that vacant piece of land than you would have been had they not implemented this strategy. So kudos to Denver for getting this passed and implemented, and it's keep making a huge difference in not using even more energy. But it didn't actually help us reduce from our 2020 benchline. So we gotta attack this thing from multiple fronts if we're gonna have a prayer. So that's that one. Small commercial energy audits. So this is energy auditing of our smaller commercial buildings under 50,000 square feet. Residential behavior programs. If you may get a bill at your house that tells you how you're doing compared to your neighbor. You might get a smiley face in that bill if you're more efficient than your neighbor, and a frowny face if you're using more energy than your neighbor. Coming directly from the utility. Those have a huge energy savings impact. Those programs are pretty proven across the country. Universal Transit Pass was one that fell under the innovative bucket. And what that's really all about is, think about it if you lived in city and county of Denver and you had an app on your phone, and it was just your go-to mobility app. And on that app, you could get everything from RTD bus lines and train lines to Uber and Lyft, to B-cycle and bike sharing, to carpooling, to you're part of maybe you're a student at university and there's other car sharing things that your university has. It's basically our taxi, a one-stop shop app that you can use anytime you want to get anywhere. So this is a philosophical shift from moving from, hey, I own a car and I'm responsible for my transportation, to transportation as a service, or sometimes the term is mobility as a service. We've actually seen this modeled in Helsinki, is the probably best example of transitioning a city from this sort of, they call it MAS, or MAAS, mobility as a service. And that's sort of just a different way of thinking. So if residents inside of the city borders had this sort of universal transit pass, maybe they would see no need to have their own vehicle, or maybe their vehicle would be reserved for, hey, going to road trips or out of state or into the mountains somewhere. Bulk buying and tax-free purchasing. For the sake of time, I'm going to keep us moving. But there's some bulk buying and tax-free purchasing for Energy Star rated appliances and some discounts for more energy efficient equipment. Heating incentive programs have been hugely beneficial in Maine and the East Coast. Great strategies. We're in a heating dominated climate here in Colorado. More than 50%, 60% or so of our energy we're using is on the heating side. So good benefits there. Energy audits on point of sale are, hey, anytime a single family home goes up for sale, it's required that an energy audit is done and that energy audit report is submitted to the buyer. So now I'm going to receive, I want to go buy a new home and I'm going to get an energy audit report for that home when I buy it and an opportunity to make changes. Of course, the owner could get that report done, make those changes and sell their home for maybe more money or be able to advertise that they did that at least to their potential buyers and give themselves an edge. And the person inheriting that home now has that information and is empowered to make changes on their own or at least know what changes and costs are associated with those to have those made. We've seen that be really successful. In the city of Austin, they've rolled that program out. It's been pretty cool. We really encourage Denver to do an increased renewable energy investment, particularly recommended solar. There's not great wind resource in the Denver area. You really kind of got to get either into the north west corner of Colorado or down to like Lamar region to really good wind resource here in the state. Inside the city and county of Denver, producing wind at scale isn't real feasible. However, renewable energy from solar power is very, very feasible. There's lots of great places, lots of rooftops to do solar. We calculated that if the city and county of Denver were to find 6 square miles somewhere, maybe out by the airport or Arsenal or somewhere out there out east, they could find just 6 square miles and plaster with solar panels. They could actually produce enough renewable energy to power the whole city. So, the sun's a powerful thing and would be pretty cool. So we provided some recommendations around increasing solar production in particular. And then last but not least is mobile pricing policy. This has to do with using different lanes of the highway. We kind of see that with HOV lanes and that kind of thing, mobile price structures for using the infrastructure that Denver maintains, or CDOT maintains. So over to the right, I'm sure my blabbering has made you go look at this chart while I've been talking. And so you've probably already been looking at it. What you can see there is our baseline 2012 year all the way to the left and our goal all the way to the right. Our target, our fossil fuel target, is the green line that goes across the middle of the chart, what we're trying to get to. And then what we have above that are what we call wedges. So this is maybe a typical wedge diagram where we're looking at a simplified version of the different things that add up to us getting our goal. So the biggest one is the light gray-ish color one, which is our energy efficiency strategies, which I just basically went through for you in some detail. Then we've got another sliver for our renewable gasoline. This can be hydrogen, this can be electricity. There's different ways in which we can get to biofuel, renewable gas. And then XL renewable electricity strategies that we're recommending are the gold and the orange. So XL renewable electricity is when XL provides a percentage of their fuel mix for renewables. This is managed through the Public Utilities Commission for the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard that requires Xcel Energy as an investor-owned utility to meet certain renewable goals by a certain time. I think it's 30% by 2020. So we've taken that into account in this sliver. And then the renewable electricity strategies in the orange would be the distributed generation or rooftop solar, or if they did find 6 square miles and could do their own solar installations. So those things combined get us to this target green line by 2020. And what you're looking at kind of on the bottom, the big yellow thing and the big maroon thing, those are the actual planned forecast or how we would affect energy consumption from the gap analysis. So that's the baseline energy use adding up to our total. And of course, the very top yellow line going across the top is that's the business as usual case if we don't do any of the wedges. So hopefully you can see how the strategies, we looked at the gap analysis, we figured out what the goal is, how it works together, where the energy is being used. We devised what the best strategies could be implemented to sort of attack that usage, and then how all those things add up in this wedge diagram to get us to goal. So hopefully that kind of took you through our thinking through this process. And I think that's my last slide. And so I'll kind of end the slides there and spend just 5 or 7 minutes walking you guys through the dynamic tool. And I'll let you just kind of pull that up for me and show you how it is we're taking account for these tools, or sorry, these strategies. So hopefully everybody on their screen can see an Excel workbook. And can they see that?
We're good to go, yep.
Awesome. So what we're looking at here is a pretty complicated, big old energy model engine of the entire city and county of Denver. But we've made it very, very simple and sort of licensed it out or given it to Denver as part of this so that they can use and track their strategies over time. There's a lot of tabs along here in the bottom, but really what we've got is only 4 tabs that we really need to interact with. And these are our input tabs. Our red tabs are our energy models. And we've got a business as usual model, we've got an energy plan forecast model, and we've got a fossil fuel forecast model. And then we've got a lot of charts because you want to look at this stuff in lots of different ways. And so the green, the purple, and the light blue are all different charts basically summarizing different graphical representations. So the green charts look at our progress toward achieving our 2020 goal. The purple tabs really represent our progress toward achieving basically the energy goal, but in a different way. And then the blue tabs represent various baseline conditions, so articulating our assumptions going into those into the models. The black tabs are just our data tabs and feed into these models, so not to be messed with. So that being said, I'll just kind of walk you through really basic. So for those of you who do greenhouse gas emissions inventories on an annual basis, this is a very standard way that you're probably used to seeing and inputting greenhouse gas inventory data. Denver has been doing this backdating to 2005, right, Tom? Yep. And what we created in our model is a mirror of what they're already doing. So Tom and his team do a greenhouse gas inventory, and they get that data dating back to 2005, as I said. And then all they do is each year that they do that, all they do is in these yellow boxes, they plug in what their results are from that inventory. If I expand this, you can see here's all of the data that they've already put in going back to 2005. So they really just need to interact with this tab once a year. And then all they need to do is change this one cell, B12. That's our big mover from 2013 to 2014 to 2015, just 1 year at a time, which changes our projected data to become actual data 1 year at a time. So that's a data entry table. Here's our energy efficiency strategies entry. So here's what's kind of cool. This is the strategies that I already articulated one by one, and here's where they show up in the model. So they show up in terms of residential strategies for electricity and natural gas, commercial strategies for electricity and natural gas, and then mobile strategies. And then if there are other strategies and sort of unique pervasive strategies, we've got space for those as well. This allows Denver to mess with and change the existing strategies based on as they feel how effective these strategies are being as they're being implemented. It also allows them to add new strategies that we never thought of in our plan here in the TBD column. So I'll walk through one of these. So multifamily benchmarking and disclosure for electricity. So the disclosure policy, the benchmarking policy, produces a certain amount of savings in gas, electricity, in residential and commercial. So it shows up in multiple places. We can see how much is feeding into here. And then this is a sensitivity analysis, which allows us to rapidly update the model for projected efficiencies, adoption rates, other factors that can, compliance can change over time. And then an inception year. So if we thought the policy was going to roll out in 2016 and it's actually not rolling out until 2017, we can simply change the inception year here so it will automatically calculate those savings accurately. And then lastly, to the right, we've got something called distributed savings, which is a sort of unique category, which we just put an X in if and when it's true. Distributed savings are savings that are achieved by 2020. So a strategy might say, hey, if we implement this today, by the time we get to 2020, we're going to achieve a certain amount of savings. Non-distributed savings are year-over-year savings. So like this strategy gets implemented, and every year it's implemented, we see savings this year and 5% more next year and 5% more the year after that, and so on and so forth. So we make a distinction between what are distributed and what are additive. There's a section, same as the energy efficiency, only a section for renewable energy. So you can see we've got quite a bit of solar installation going on in the year 2016, and it's distributed savings, but those can be changed or added. Wind installs or other type of renewable energies can be added here as well. And then we've got our assumptions, which is great because this is really what feeds the two tabs we just looked at. And these are the calculation methodologies and the assumptions we put into each one of these calculations. So for example, at the top, we've got our residential energy audits, point of sale electricity savings. We've assumed this saves 10% of electricity, and that's based on the research and the data we got from the city of Austin and other cities that have put that forward. And then we've done math from the assessor's database to go, hey, how many units are sold per year in Denver? What percent of those are renter occupied? What percentage of the square feet are impacted as a result of this? And then the total 2014 residential electricity consumption. This will give us our incremental annual savings between now and 2020. So these are these sort of more technical research-based inputs and assumptions that go into what we think the savings are going to be. And this also gives Denver the ability to change these as they see fit. If they think it's more like 8%, or if the renter occupancy percentages changes from the assessor database or from the research they're getting from their other departments, they can go into all these assumptions and really tweak the numbers here if they want, or they can create new strategies here to inform the tabs we just looked at. So with that, the rest of these tabs are outputs from that. So we've got our models, which are just basically lots of data on our projection years going to 2020. These inform our charts that we've looked at a little bit of so far. So there's our simple chart that we've already talked about in the PowerPoint. Our different forecasting charts, our different wedges, our cost avoidance, our annual cost avoidance per strategy. So you can see actually if Denver were to implement all these strategies, they'd be avoiding about $450 million of cost. So these are substantial cost savings from an economic point of view. Of course, the benefits of who receive those costs are distributed. It's not like the city's pocketbook. It's taxpayers, it's city, it's commercial entities, it's residences, and people themselves. So the sort of end use of where those savings get realized is variable, but this is what the strategies produce in terms of cost savings. And then, different forecasting charts. I'm not going to, explain every single one of these charts, but you can see the relative impacts of the different energy conservation measures and the effects on that per sector, the effects on that in different, stationary versus mobile we talked about, all the way through trends for fuel trends, how the fuel consumptions are going to look over the next number of years, business as usual versus energy forecast. And then, of course, these tabs, our data tabs, reference things like heating and cooling degree days, how are we normalizing for weather, what is Excel doing through their demand-side management programs, what are our square footages across the city and county, and what are our non-residential or commercial square footages. So kind of lots of data there from the assessor's database. But with that, I'll kind of wrap up. Hopefully that was insightful to you to see about what the strategies are that we recommended that Denver's been implementing, and then also how we're taking account for these and working through these in a dynamic model atmosphere.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. What great information. At this time, if you have any questions, just go ahead and type that in and we'll get those questions answered. Again, I appreciate McKinstry and Denver sharing all of this great information with us. Definitely worthwhile and something to continue to explore. Again, type those questions in. We'll give it another minute or two. While we're doing that, I do want to remind you about our district meetings coming up starting in September. CML.org, just go under outreach meetings and you'll see the schedule. We'll be traveling quite a bit around the state. They will go through early October as well. So we hope to see you there and at the meeting near you. All right, well, I don't see any questions, so I assume that everything was explained well, and if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to get in touch with McKinstry. Yeah, there you go. So thank you so much again for participating, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.